So this video may be far more important than others because I'm going to give you a guiding rule for how to understand what's going on or how I process. So there are phrases in different businesses or different industries about, how to make sense of things. In politics, they say politics makes strange bedfellows, and means people's interests don't always align the same way, and different people are aligned at different times. Um, there was the famous phrase from Woodward and Bernstein, the Watergate investigators, that said, follow the money. Well, I'm going to say something a little bit different, and that's follow the interests. And what I mean by that is they look at the key players and what are their interests, and that'll tell you a lot. There's in economics, they say incentives matter. And it's very similar to something along those lines. So follow the interests. So we're going to start here with the British. This is the British Ministry of Defense, and they talked about the Kerch Bridge. And I think that's a good starting point to say follow the interests from the Kerch Bridge forward. So let's watch this. Logistical issues faced by Russian forces in southern Ukraine have likely become more acute following damage to the bridge. Follow the interests. Putin needs the Kerch Bridge. So that's why there's this massive retaliatory strike. You better not do that again. I say blow the thing to sky high, like blow it up so it can never be repaired again. What's he going to do? Is he going to do more than this? He's not going to do more than this. However, large queue waiting cargo trucks remains backed up near the crossing. Okay, repair efforts are ongoing. So they can get some through, but they have to really work hard to repair it. Russian forces operating in southern Ukraine are likely increasingly logistical supply flow through Mariupol in an attempt to compensate for the reduced capacity of the Kerch Bridge. The Kerch Bridge is really important. Again, the ground line of communication through Zaporizhia Oblast is becoming important to the sustainability of Russia's operation. Okay, so now you see why the fury from Russia, because Putin knows that he needs the Kerch Bridge, and it was a vanity project for him. Okay, ISW, this is the Institute for the Study of War. Russian forces conduct a series of drone and missile strikes against residential areas and critical infrastructure throughout October 17th. They struck Kiev, Zaporizhia, areas in Vinnytsia, Sumy, I don't know how to pronounce that one, honestly, Mykolaiv Oblast, and launched 9 missile strikes and 39 airstrikes. Okay, so they're doing the same thing, and they've been doing it for more than a week now. On October 17th, drone attack on... Now they switched largely to drone attacks. Now, they've been using these missiles, $2 million missiles they've been lobbing at infrastructure or residential buildings or whatever. Maybe they're actually trying to hit missile structure and they're hitting residential buildings, or maybe they are interested in the terror of hitting the residential building in the strike. I think it's more of the latter. October 17th drone attack on residential infrastructure in Kiev is consistent with the broader pattern of Russian forces prioritizing creating psychological terror effects in Ukraine over achieving tangible battlefield effects. Follow the interest. What does Putin want you to do, or what's his mentality? He's trying to get you to knuckle under. Okay, and so follow the interest. This makes sense. One Shahed 136 drone carries about 3 shells worth of explosive material. Okay, so instead of sending a normal artillery shell, 3 artillery shells is about the impact of one of these drones. So these drones are having a tremendous psychological effect. And what they do is they send these drones in a swarm, so it's hard to shoot them down, or to get all of them at least. Russian forces are continually using the Shahed 136 drones to generate psychological effects associated with targeting civilian areas, and these drones are from Iran. That's a very important point. Okay, let's keep going. Ukraine war. Russia dive bombs Kyiv with kamikaze drones. And so there's only just one thing, that it's this wave of attacks of these. They swarm, and they swarm in waves. And so that's got to be not very comforting if you're there in Kyiv, with what appear to be Iranian-made kamikaze drones. Again, Iranian. A Reuters news agency journalist reported seeing fragments of a drone in the attack that bore the words "for Belgorod." So this is kind of, they're writing on this before they send it in, as revenge for Belgorod. Okay, that may or may not be true, but it's a Reuters news agency journalist, so it probably is. Now, what are kamikaze drones? They're believed to be Iranian supplied. They are. These drones loiter above the target before attacking because they can kind of, just hover and watch wherever they are before they actually drop their bombs or drop themselves down, which makes themselves into bombs. They're packed with explosives that detonate on impact, and again, they have 3 times the effect of a regular artillery piece. They're often sent in waves, which makes them hard to hit or hard to even spot or whatever. But here's another thing: follow the incentives or follow the interest. Um, Putin has been using $2 million missiles to strike. These cost just $20,000 each. So this is a much better use of economically of his resources from his perspective than using these cruise missiles. Ukraine has also used kamikaze drones, including the U.S.-made Switchback model that we have supplied them that are very effective. So drones are the wave of the future. I've told my son this. My sons are in Civil Air Patrol, and they're actually learning how to fly drones. And I'm telling them that, like this, not just Ukraine, whatever the next war is, I hope it's a long way off, but drones are going to play a big part. Okay, let me keep going here. If you want to know more about drones, because this is not the point of what I'm talking about, Dennis did a great job talking about drones in his video today. So watch 1017, watch Dennis. Okay, these are what the drones look like, and I'm going to show you just a couple of them. That's the kind of effect that it'll have. It'll have a pretty devastating effect. Police were trying to shoot them down with small arms fire. It's not terribly effective to do that, although there have been reports that that's been done. There's 1 or 2 more down here that I want. There you go. I mean, they can have a pretty powerful impact. So, yeah. Okay. Ukraine needs to protect the sky over energy facilities. Okay, so if you're following the interest, here's the energy minister talking about how now they're testing our ability to quickly restore the energy electrical substation. Why? Follow the interest. What does Russia want to do? If you can knock out all the electrical sources, you not only plunge people into darkness, but they're going to face a very hard winter. And so that's Putin's incentive. So he now has an incentive as well. And his incentive is to get air defense to protect all these so that he can, follow the interest and you'll understand what's going on. In addition, he said the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant again lost external power source and operated on diesel generators. I have a horrible feeling that it was somewhere along the way, the Russians are going to hit Zaporizhzhia and there's going to be a bad nuclear accident. I don't know this. This is a horrible feeling I have. And then they'll blame the Ukrainians in the same way that they have blamed them for the supposed Heimer attack on the POWs or blamed them for the same nuclear power plant being shelled before when it was pretty much clear that it was the Russians that did it. So I have an uneasy feeling about that. Okay, Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant again switches to diesel. This is just saying the same thing in a more robust way. Its own article talking about that. So in a related note, there is this expert on disinformation and propaganda saying it's time to start ignoring the Kremlin's empty threats. Now this is really interesting. So Putin has had, he's gotten a long way just making threats, and the threat is often more powerful than the actual act. So it's a really odd thing to understand how that works, but taken abstractly, the threat of nuclear strike is obviously something horrible, something that you want to avoid. However, I really do not want us to fall for the trap. And he goes down and he says this. He says more than a decade of Russian aggression, beginning with a cyber attack in Estonia in 2007 from Russian IP addresses, continuing through Russia's 5-day war to support Georgia, in 2008, and then the occupation of Crimea. He says, as disinformation propaganda specialist, what I see is 15 years of empty threats being used over and over and over again by Moscow simply because they're paralyzing us. So Putin's been masterful at this. I mean, I got to give the guy credit. He's used these to great effect. So all I'm saying is that we shouldn't fall for this trap because it only helps Putin to achieve his goal, and it harms Ukrainians who are actually fighting for European and Euro-Atlantic values. And so there's something very right about that. And included with this, I'm afraid that the Russian disinformation war is very competent, very skillful, and can achieve massive results. And I fear that they manage sometimes to influence how we frame the debate. The voices that the more you support Ukraine, the bigger the problems will be. Russia will be angry and they might do something terrible. Those are the ones that are steering the debate rather than where's the justice or how can we allow this to happen, which is where I'm coming from, right? I mean, how can we allow Russia to do this to their neighbor, which is a legit democracy right on their doorstep that is a real threat to them only because they're a democracy right on their doorstep. And these guys are nuts. When I say they're nuts, here's an article. A pensioner is detained for calling Russia a fascist state on Facebook. Now think about that. Now think about the irony of that. Okay, you can't call the state a fascist, or you're going to jail for what? For saying that the state's fascist? Seriously. This lady went to jail for calling the state fascist. So defending this democracy is very, very important. Okay, now follow the interest again. We had the drone attacks, and you're Ukraine. What do you have to do? Well, we need more drones, but to fight back. But they're also starting to create their own drone. Ukrobrunprom, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that, is a state concern that's made it clear that they are completing the development of Ukrainian drones. Okay, the range is 1,000 kilometers. Warhead is about 75 kilograms. We're completing the development. I'm pretty sure they got Western plans and are just having to manufacture the pieces. So, because again, if you follow the interest, Western nations want to support Ukraine because they see the hostility of Russia and they can't allow that. Here's again, follow the interest. Here is Israel is giving arms to Ukraine and will destroy ties with Russia, says Medvedev. Okay, now why is it going to destroy ties with Russia? Follow the interest. He does not want them to do this. This he calls a very reckless move. It will destroy all interstate relations between our countries. But again, why is he doing it? Well, they're supplied with weapons. It's time for Israel to declare Stephen Bandera and Roman Shemchachev, I don't know how to pronounce that, heroes. Earlier on Monday, now these guys are Ukrainian nationalists who sided with Germany during World War II, and that's why they're called these whatever. Now, so they did fight on that side, but again, the way that the Russians think, anyone who opposes Russia is a Nazi, loosely, not a specifically Jew-hating, Holocaust-loving kind of something. Earlier on Monday, Israel Diaspora Affairs Minister Nachim Shayi said on Twitter that due to Iran reportedly transferring ballistic missiles to Russia for use in the Ukraine war, there is no longer any doubt where Israel should stand. Now, if you follow, and here's the actual tweet itself, okay? Now, if you follow what's going on, because Iran supplied Russia, Israel, who hates Iran, is now weighing in where they waited on the sidelines for 235 days. And now they're going to support Ukraine, or it looks like they're going to be supporting Ukraine. There's no longer any doubt where Israel should stand in this bloody conflict. The time has come for Ukraine to receive military aid, just as the USA and NATO countries provide, because of Iran. So if you follow the interest, you understand why Israel is lining up there. Okay, now it's time for fun with Russian state media. This is another example. This is their view of this in Pravda. It's the same article, but just from their perspective. They say the same thing that I just said, and then when we get down to the bottom, they say this really interesting bit. Relations between Israel and Iran remain extremely tense. The former accuses the latter of a nuclear threat and support of terrorist organizations, while Iran believes that Israel is involved in the murder of a number of its military and nuclear scientists, because you threatened to wipe them off the map with your nuclear bombs that you were developing, so they destroyed your nuclear facility, so you couldn't do that. That's what's going on. So Israel is very motivated. Follow the interests. Okay? Same thing with this article, Israel considers supporting Nazi ideology. Well, again, it's not that they're trying to, like, I think I'd like to go to the Holocaust. It's not that. It's that they call anyone who is anti-Russia in their minds a Nazi. So it's a very loose use of the word Nazi. Okay. Here, a partial call-up of reservists in Moscow ends officially. So follow the interest. The author of this article wants to show, see, full mobilization has happened in Moscow. Okay, or not full quotas have been met in Moscow. Partial call-up of reservists, which was announced on September 21st, has officially ended in Moscow. Moscow has fully implemented the task of partial mobilization. But then they admit later on in the article this. On Friday, October 14th, it was reported that the police were snatching up reservists in the streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg. In particular, in Moscow, security officers would stop men of military age at metro stations and hand summons to them. The head of the Federation Council Committee at the Constitutional Legislation and State Building said that mass raids on reservists weren't cool. Right? Such mobilization measures were illegal, noting that military commissars did not have the right to act against indefinite circle of people, just handing out these summons. Look, people following the interest, you understand that people have been fleeing Russia. More have fled Russia than actually have invaded Ukraine. Nearly 70,000 Russians fled to Georgia alone. This is in Bloomberg, okay? 70,000. More than 70,000 Russians have fled to Georgia last month after Putin. Now, it's not just Georgia. There are other places that they could go. Look at the map. They fled to Finland until they closed their borders. The Baltic states, which closed their borders early. Poland closed their borders. Other parts of Europe. They fled to Turkey. They fled to Georgia. They fled to Kazakhstan and other stans. They fled to Mongolia. They were even, I was talking about last week, they were even fleeing to South Korea. Following their interest, it makes sense. They want to get out. They don't want to have any part in this war. Okay. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being with me all this time. You're the kind of person that cares about Ukraine, and now you're informed. You can think through what's going to happen next. You can see around the corner if you understand that you just need to follow the interests.